Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to this Facebook Live in the Social Marketers Exchange by Sprout Social. I'm so excited for the time that we have together and navigating this topic that we'll be discussing. First, I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Kristen Rice, and I'm the Senior Marketing Analyst at Sprout Social. In addition to my job, I have the pleasure serving as a part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion leadership team here at Sprout. And furthermore, I also co lead our Black at Sprout business resource group, which leads me to today's topic. So, we're going to be focused on the Black Lives Matter movement and how you can enter into conversations like this moving forward with confidence and how you can intertwine diversity within your current social strategies. So, luckily, I'm joined by two wonderful people in this conversation. So, first, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Morgan, who is the social media specialist at Givelify and is the owner and founder of the recently created Social Lock. So, super excited to see all of the success there. And I'm also joined by the great Talissa Bell, who is the social media manager at Idea Grove. So excited for both of these women to be here during this time. But before we jump in, I want to cover just a few housekeeping items. So, first, if you have any questions, please drop those in the comments and Joe Huber will get them into a doc. Unfortunately, we might not get to every question, but what we don't address here on the live session, we'll make sure someone follows up with you in the comments below. And second is this is definitely a heavy topic. And there's a lot of emotional labor involved with this topic. And this isn't something that we're just going to solve for even in this short span of time that we have together. But I'm extremely grateful to both Stephanie and Talissa for their time and their thoughts. So please be kind and respectful with your questions. So with that, we will actually jump right on in. So Talissa, I'm going to start with you. So the first question we have is, how can brands that don't have a history of DEI initiatives or have previously taken a stand do so in an authentic way?
I think the biggest thing that matters at this particular time is that we're making genuine movements. When I look back at Blackout Tuesday and things like that, it was absolutely wonderful from the standpoint of to see so many brands participate in that moment. But I think that we're kind of stepping into a new frontier, and that the people that have been part of the Black Lives Matter movement for so long now really are demanding action. So if you're stepping into this realm and you're starting to participate, people want to see the receipts, basically, is what's happening. So you're having people ask companies, well, what does your leadership group look like? Are they actually diverse? What are you doing to contribute aside from just putting out a statement? Are you actually going out and making contributions and donations? Are you taking initiatives? Are you actually going forth and doing diversity and inclusion training to help correct biases that may be in your organization? So I think a lot of these types of steps are what matters. I think that it's important for organizations, if they have made a statement at this time, when the movements first start kind of kicking off earlier in this month, they should be following up because people are really going to be coming back to them and going, hey, I saw that you posted that little black square. So what's next? So I think that we're now entering an era of accountability. And I think that it's very important for all businesses to step up and do so.
Mm, yep. Definitely. Stephanie, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think in order to be coming from a place of accountability, you need to really reference the past and the history of the brand. And so don't be afraid to say, hey, we messed up in the past, or hey, we haven't done anything in the past, but that's changing now. And we're moving forward. We understand the call to action and we're ready to make that difference in what we're doing moving forward. And then, like Talissa said, people are going to be following up. The eyes are on brands right now. So it's more important than ever before to acknowledge what you've done in the past, set that precedent moving forward.
Yeah, and I think such a great example of that is, the NFL posted like that we stand with Black lives, but historically we've seen like the opposite behavior. So like how does, like obviously like you can't say Black Lives Matter, but then your actions don't follow up with it. And I'm so happy that you mentioned accountability, because I think if you look through like just any sort of social thread for a brand, you see people saying like, where were you during this, and where were you during these times? And people are looking extremely at the past, and especially in a world that kind of operates in this like cancel culture where you don't want to be necessarily in that group. And it's important for you to acknowledge. I think that people will find that there is grace and can be forgiving if you say like, we have messed up.
Yes.
And I think that's very important, because saying that you haven't is far worse to your brand. And which leads to the next question that I have is like, how can a brand recover after making a misstep?
I love that question because, at the end of the day, brands are run by humans. We're all humans and we all make mistakes, and there's always going to be missteps. And so I think the best way for a brand to approach it is to take that human approach, be accountable, say what you did wrong, but more importantly, what are you going to do to fix it? And what are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? I always hear the saying, an apology without changed behavior is not a real apology. And so that should be taken the same way when it comes to brands. For example, we saw recently Snapchat put out a very interesting Snap filter for Juneteenth, and it was a bit insensitive. And so the best way that they could go to people and approach that is to say, we understand what we did wrong. This is what we're doing moving forward to make sure that never happens again.
Yeah, and with that Snapchat incident, what I found to be interesting is they did have Black developers involved in the creation of that filter, but when it came time for that final review and proofing process, they were excluded from that conversation. And I think that that's something that's very critical and important as brands start to move forward. It's not just including Black people in general in terms of part of the process, like they need to be involved from start to finish from things. I think that there's a problem with excluding Black voices from final decision making. And I think that's where a lot of businesses kind of make these faux pas. I think about a lot of different beauty brands and stuff like that. People are kind of coming to them and flagging, hey, you guys have a history of not being inclusive, and we've asked over and over and over again for you to diversify your images and all of these things. And you're now starting to see them come back and say, hey, we know that in the past that we've been doing this and we're so sorry. And we're starting to see them really take the action and make that promise and move forward with it. So to kind of come back to what Stephanie says, it's all about actually making that promise and then seeing that promise through to the end.
Yes, definitely very true. I think we've seen in the past before this point, a lot of like, I'm sorry, we're working on it. And then like sort of empty promises, right? And it's like, well, we actually need your behavior to change moving forward. And that is like absolutely critical. Like even for Snapchat, like this isn't the first. It may not necessarily have always been in the form of race, but has done things that have been insensitive. And so it's like, well, like you need to figure out a way to change your behavior. And I'm very excited that you brought up like how Black people are involved in the process, but not all the way through. And that's very important to see that final product and say like, yes, like we agree. I think the tough thing is people wanting to not feel like, do Black people need to sign off on absolutely everything? Probably, but I would wonder like what your thoughts are on there. And maybe that's like not a question for this time, but like, how do you navigate that if you're saying like, I don't have anybody who's at this level per se?
I think if you're having concerns about a product maybe possibly being perceived as wrong, this is where those study groups and research and product research and really that quality control check comes into play. I think that making sure that whomever you're presenting something to as like a first viewing, that sampling needs to be incredibly diverse. It needs to not just be Black people. You need to include all minority groups, folks from different backgrounds, whether it's different religious beliefs or just different incomes and households and all these different things to make sure that whatever you're putting forward is truly appropriate. And resonates really well. And I think that's just an important thing in terms of marketing in general, is just making sure that whatever you're pushing forward is actually connecting with the consumer themselves.
Awesome. I love that. And I think it also has to do with, we want Black people to have a seat at that table, but the white people in the room need to be educated as well. They need to get it. You know what I mean? Because if they don't, it's always going to be an uphill battle for those Black voices in the room to say why something is wrong or why they shouldn't do something. So it's so important to have that internal emphasis on understanding the culture and the reasoning behind things to make sure that it's not just one person arguing for something all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exhausting too. If you're that one town crier going, hey, this might be wrong. Like, it's very easy to get ignored versus if you have a group of people that flag something.
Exactly.
Yes, definitely appreciate you talking about how like being the town crier. I think that multiple people in different levels are feeling just burnout during this time. So just want to understand from both of your perspectives, like how can we take a step back without ignoring the movement?
Ooh, I will say the burnout is real. I've definitely experienced it myself, so I'm sure many other marketers have too. And for me, I just had to start dedicating blocks of time where I'm not in front of a screen. That includes my phone, my laptop, my iPad, even the TV. Like, I need to unplug. And I think in 2020, the internet, things that you post on the internet last for so much longer, especially if they're going viral. So I do truly feel that if you are taking a break and unplugging from 12 to 2 and something goes viral at 1, when you go back online at 3, it's still going to be there. If not just be there, there's going to be a lot more content surrounding it and a lot more opinions. And so I think as social marketers, we need to start giving ourselves the grace to unplug, because we know what's going on with the world, even if we're not necessarily looking at it 24/7.
I agree. And if you have the luxury of having a team, like for myself, I have a direct report. It's funny because she actually came to me and she's like, I feel so anxious and everything that's happening right now. She's like, but, I'm not quite sure. And I was like, there's so much going on right now. And I had to reiterate to her, as I've been reiterating to myself, I was like, we absolutely have to take this time and step away from it. I mean, even if it's putting down the phone for an hour, I had my fiance literally take my phone from me on a day where it just got so incredibly bad. And it's just really important. I've gotten to the point of where I've switched to audiobooks because I'm absolutely exhausted with staring at screens and reading things and having, like, my eyes need a break. So I try to do that. I try and do things like meditate, to try and just kind of ground myself. I try to do things like go outside and take walks and just really give myself an opportunity to unplug, doing things that I really enjoy, like listening to music. Last night I made a pie, for example. just things that are really simplistic and where it requires like almost all of your concentration, so you're not tempted to pick up the phone and scroll and continue to be angry. Because I mean, literally, if I remember there was a morning when I pulled up my phone and I looked, and the first thing I saw was White Lives Matter. And it was the day after Blackout Tuesday happened. And I was just so livid. But then I clicked on it and I saw it was the K-pop stands had completely taken over that thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. But at the same time, it gave me a moment to realize, like, oh my God, I need to throw this phone far away and I was like, I got my dose of what I need to know for now, and I'll check in on it at the end of the day, but that's it.
I'm so happy that you brought that up, because I too, I feel you go through your feed, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, and you just kind of just tense up so immediately.
Yes.
Like a flurry of emotions can happen, whether it's anger or frustration or sadness. And then at the same time, you want to respond, but you're like, my brain is literally trying to process, I feel like, faster than it can in this moment. And it's so important to just take that time and have the space. And kudos to your fiance for taking your phone. Need to do something like that. I was like, the best that I have is like my dog potentially taking, which just like not. I too, I had PTO pretty much immediately following the last week, and that was just such a great time. I think it's okay during this time of quarantine to say, like, I need a day. I think a lot of times we don't want to offer ourselves that luxury, especially when it comes to social, like this need to sort of like always be on. And if anything, this time has kind of brought to us that a lot of us need a break. And I really had to take some time to stay off of social, to your point, for a couple of hours and just not see anything. And you'd be surprised like how much of a relief that really brings to just not to be connected, and then you get sucked into I'm looking at comments and then comments on those comments, and what is this brand doing versus what is this brand doing. And to your point, Talissa, I too like books, like endless amounts of books. I cannot tell you what I have purchased in the last couple of weeks, and I'm like trying to figure out like when am I actually going to get to all of these. And I feel like it's also been an immense pressure to do a lot in such a short amount of time, which we all like don't have. So also like appreciate you, Stephanie, bringing up like just being gracious with yourself. I think for a topic like this, it is heavy, and I feel like a lot of us don't say anything because we are scared and aren't being gracious with ourselves, but more than likely we're all going to make a misstep at some point or not. And I don't think that's like a sink or swim sort of thing, but like you're going to continually progress and learn and move forward. Because if this was something that we could just solve in a short period of time, then we wouldn't be here. So definitely everyone take the time that you need and just, be at grace with yourself and the pace that you need to move.
I also just want to add, I think it's super important for people that are working in our industry to be really transparent with their leadership about what's happening. I'm very fortunate in that our agency, I was honestly like touched to the point of almost tears when our CEO asked, he goes, "How are you doing?" And I was like, I was really honest because I could have fibbed, but I was like, not the best today. But I think it's important for people, especially those that don't work in our department, but are part of our organization. They may not fully understand like how bad it is. It's like, whereas they get that luxury of taking a break, we don't. So we need to explain to them like how much of a toll it's taking, so they can make sure that they help protect us against things like burnout. Because it really is up to our leadership and companies to protect the folks that are on the front line of battling this right now.
Yes, I'm so happy you brought up leadership. Our CEO, Justin, reached out to myself and a few other people, and that was just like so like endearing. And even though, if you are like not Black, you can say like, hey, I don't understand and I will never understand, but I'm willing to have this conversation and talk. Like I think a lot of people need to come with like all of the answers and have 6,000 questions or anything like that, but you can just come with simply like your thoughts and comfort and presence in that moment. Awesome. So next question that I have is how can organizations better support the Black community moving forward?
I think there are so many ways to do this, both externally and internally. When we're thinking about internally, are there Black people on your marketing team? First and foremost, like let's talk about that. You know what I mean? A lot of these brand fumbles wouldn't happen, like we said, if they had that seat at the table. Exactly. In addition to that, it's great to have those people in those roles, but what are you doing to make sure people can get into those roles? Are you doing internship programs? Do you have a talent pipeline program for people of color? Because we know that they typically don't have those opportunities that other people might have. And so there's a lot that you can do internally. On the external side, I think it's about being a visible ally and visibly supporting the movement. So yeah, you can post a Black square, but your content shouldn't be a Black square on your feed and then white people. It just doesn't add up. So I think that brands should really be using more Black people in brand photography. What stock images are you using? Are there Black and brown people in it, or Asians, or all other types of ethnicities? There's so much opportunity to present yourself as a diverse and inclusive brand, both on the internal and the external side.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I love that. Just, thinking about how you create that pipeline, because a lot of the work does happen like basically within yourself, and in that case, like right at home. So what are you doing like as a business? I think like a good example of that is Pepsi. Like they have said like, okay, we're donating $400 million. Now, obviously not everyone is going to be able to go out there and donate $400 million. So don't take that, as a note, but they've dedicated, doing all this work over the next 5 years, not just about like donating for against racial injustice and doing anti-racist work, but they've actually said, like, here are the commitments that we're making internally of the things that we're going to do. So to your point, creating a diverse pipeline. So what does it look like to have an internship program? And then that kind of goes back to our earlier point about accountability. Like, they're putting it out there for the world to see, which is great, because now they can be held to accountable to say, like, all right, it's been a year, it's been 2 years, 3 years, and then at 5, okay, did you actually achieve all of these things that you set out? And was that $100 million actually put to the use that you kind of set out and laid out before the world in June of 2020?
Right.
Yeah. And even for smaller brands, so like with Idea Grove, my company let us know that, hey, we're going to donate to a local nonprofit that battles against racism. And we're also doing employee matching for any nonprofit that you find that helps support this particular cause and initiative. I think that's something that can be helpful for internal. I think even things as simple as really looking at your own internal policies and making sure that they're not discriminatory in any way towards anybody that's a person of color. There are still, unfortunately, some companies out there that have policies that police minority hair, for example. So I've had so many stories of guy friends in particular that have had to cut their locks, that have had to straighten their hair. Folks have to put on wigs. I see you breathing, Stephanie. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Braids seem to be, quote, unprofessional, like all these things. Now is the time to have those kinds of conversations and make sure that you're doing that, making sure that you're not discriminating against hijabs if you're a Muslim. Like all of these different things really need to kind of be accounted for. And they sound so minor, but making the workplace more comfortable and friendly. And I even think about the recent Supreme Court case that made it illegal to discriminate against the LGBTQ community. Just making that environment even more inclusive. Because I think a lot of people in these types of spaces, they really kind of adjust their personality so that make sure that they fit, but they're never fully comfortable in it. So I think that that's a huge thing that can be done internally. Externally, I'd love to see these businesses appear more at like historically Black colleges, colleges that tend to be a little bit more ethnically diverse, and really like seeing the big brands show up there and trying to recruit from those particular talent pools.
I think that is very also important to note is like historically Black colleges are key, and they do need support during this time. And it would be great to see like large brands come up and actually support, HBCUs. I think that would be something that would be great to see. And I also like that you brought up that your organization is doing things locally. I think we always sort of think, okay, like it should just be some much larger organization that heads up from a national standpoint. But I think every brand can think about things that are in particular happening in their city and causes that they can donate to, and organizations that like support the city that they're in. So like for Chicago, it could be like the Chicago Community Bond Fund, like things like that are just primarily local and can be a great way to do the work like in your hometown. Awesome. So next question that we have is, how do brands move on from these discussions, and when should they start publishing regular content? So I at least will kind of answer this, and I would love to hear it, like Talissa and Stephanie, your thoughts during this question. But there is no sort of like going back to regular content, like kind of what was alluded to in the beginning. There's like accountability here, and diversity, equity, inclusion should be ingrained within your culture and what's happening internally, and then that will resonate externally and through the work that you do. And I actually saw a post on Instagram earlier this week, and it said, Black lives still matter, even if your feed goes back to normal. And I think that is just like a great testament that, yes, we are saying that people can continue to post about their product and service and their sort of regularly scheduled content. But Stephanie, also to what you allude to, it shouldn't be like Black square and then white person, white person, white person, and then Black square. Like it should be like, native in everything that you're doing. And that's, I think, the thing that all brands need to do better during this time.
Totally agree. I think there's just so many ways to be inclusive. There's really no excuse, especially after this whole new movement that we're having. There's really no excuse to not ingrain it into what you're doing content-wise. Regular content is going to be different. moving forward, just because we're going to see more inclusivity and more diverse spaces in branding, I think. And I love it. I love the direction that we're headed. I think this is not something that just happened and things are going to go back to the way they were. I think things are definitely going to be different moving forward forever.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a little challenging for folks more so on the B2B side versus business to consumer. What we're kind of doing is for the clients that came to us, they're like, hey, we want to jump into this conversation. We want to be active part of it. What they're telling us is they're like, hey, we did our initial post, but we want to continue posting throughout the year, kind of talking about the different initiatives that we're participating in. They're coming to us and asking, hey, are there any groups that we can put our company into that focuses more so on minority groups, that we can make those types of connections and make sure that we're including them. I think it's also just making sure that they're being really conscious of the type of posts that they're putting out there, making sure that those types of messages are inclusive, whether it's from stock photography, to Stephanie's point, or just the messaging, and just making sure that it's really on point and it's on topic. So it may not be consistent posting that Black Lives Matter, but I also would like to really see just companies in general, anytime that they see social discourse that's happening in their comment section about this particular topic, I would love to actually see them step in and shut that conversation down versus having to rely on minority voices to shut things down, because it's exhausting emotional labor to constantly just have that discourse. It would be nice for them if they're saying that they're supporting this thing and they see customers coming in and making arguments and trying to kind of create some discord, for them to actually shut it down and say, hey, we don't tolerate that kind of conversation on our social channels, and just really let it be known.
Yeah.
So I look at NASCAR and I'm like, wow, y'all really let us know. that was like the most magical thing I've seen.
NASCAR fan.
Yeah.
No.
Every single race.
So
yeah. I think that's like something great to just really bring up. Like NASCAR is, an exemplary example of that, something that we've seen recently that, in light of everything that happened, entire organization sort of bands together and says we don't accept this. And I'm so happy to listen that you brought up comments. I don't think we do see enough brands really in the comments and telling people this isn't the type of behavior in essence that we want happening, particularly in the comments, and sort of shutting those down. Instead of you see one comment that turns into 50 replies of people going back and forth. So it would be interesting to see how brands can better navigate those. Granted, you can't get to everything, but still very important to be involved in those conversations, because I think that can also be a hindrance to your brand as well. Just seeing that back and forth, a lot of times we see that's what's getting highlighted is look at this thread back and forth on a post from X person. So next question that we have is actually sort of the ones that we have before. So how do you decide what you post about / share and align to your company vision? So an example is this person says, we're a social media management solution, and there were 2 big Supreme Court decisions this week, which we know, LGBTQ and then DACA. Is it appropriate for us to share or say something on social about that? And they decided that they shouldn't, and instead we're going to highlight other orgs doing that well.
I think that's nice.
Yeah, I think it just depends on your brand stance and what your brand is comfortable with, and your audience. You know your audience the best, and so you should be able to have a good understanding of how they'll react to stuff like that. And so I think it really is just a personal brand values decision on whether or not you do talk about it, and then how. I think the way that they decided to do it is really great and probably really complimentary to their audience and what their brand stands for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I completely agree. My biggest concern with everything that's going on is just our brands trying to force themselves into spaces that they don't quite fit into. And I know that that's something that everybody has a concern about. If I'm silent, am I being complicit? If I am speaking, am I going to get criticism because I've never spoken on this before? And it really seems like I'm trying to fit myself into the space that maybe I don't quite belong in. I think even just as a brand going forward and commenting as a brand and showing, hey, this is so wonderful, or liking posts, or like to Stephanie's point, just sharing the content and letting it show on your feed. You're not necessarily the author of it, but you're just quietly showing, hey, we support this. And I think also just making sure that your company statements reflect what it is that you believe in as well. I think this is a good time for companies to really sit down and take a look at what some of their mission statements and their credos and all of those things are. Because I think in the past it was very, very taboo to become politically involved in any way or take a hard stance because people didn't want to hear from brands in that way. But now we've switched to this very conscious capitalistic type of approach. And so now I think it's the complete opposite. And I think that even people, as they're looking to join organizations, they want to know what you're about. So I think making that abundantly clear, I think that even kind of potentially helps improve your company's stance from hiring the right people, making sure that you're attracting the right talent, that type of thing too.
Yeah, I think that's very important too as well. When you mention just, it's okay to highlight other orgs. And I think that's like the indirect way of saying like you support it, even though you can't necessarily create your own content.
Right.
And that's definitely something that's needed. And to your point, Talissa, about people looking and wanting to know, like, where do you stand on these issues? And it's very, I know, hard and new for all of us to navigate this, to say, especially like when people look back at what you've said in the past and trying to see, like, does that contradict what you're saying now? And
right.
It's important to really take a stance, and that it's, again, okay to make missteps and then acknowledge what has happened in the past, for good or for bad.
I do want to say that with the mishaps and the missteps, I know that we're in this very big cancel culture. I think that everybody needs to be really patient and give grace, because you have a lot of people that weren't necessarily outspoken allies before, and they're trying to learn, whether it's from a business level or a personal level. And you have to understand, just like with children and anything else, like everybody is learning, everybody's going to get a mistake. They're not going to get 100 on that test the first time.
Right.
So I think that we really need to sit down and start evaluating what the intention of whatever the messaging is that people are trying to put out. And we need to really take the time, and it's this part's the really exhausting emotional labor of all of this, especially for folks in the community. But we do need to take the time and pull them aside and say, hey, I appreciate that you shared this, but I do want to let you know that it could have come across as this way. So I just want to kind of share my thoughts with you, and let's have a discussion, those kinds of things. I think that we need to start kind of embracing that mentality and kind of evolve beyond cancel culture just a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We're like not going to progress, right, if we don't allow that grace. So I think that is the exact approach that we need to take. Just really being able to say, you may have had this misstep, and I'm going to help tell you, like, this is what you need to do, what you should be doing. But at the same time, it doesn't mean like, no one buy your product. Like,
my gosh.
So like, I know that, like, I think that's what we're all like definitely sort of scared of, is like nobody wants to be a part of like the canceled brand out there, but I can understand the fear.
Yeah.
The other question that we have is, knowing that brands still need to drive awareness, sales, customer services, etc., how do they do that while still being an ally and doubling down their content?
So with that, I would say that you can continue. I think that you should have kind of a mixture of your content. So, and this is normal social one-on-one rules anyway, is you can still have your product messaging, but then you can also still have your initiatives and those types of messages that you support. So I think it's important for brands to make sure that they're diversifying their content, so they're not just constantly trying to sell product and selling and selling and selling. It's also taking the time to share those company culture viewpoints and who they are and what they're about. And that's a good time for you to then continue to reiterate what it is that you stand for, what it is that you don't support, those types of things.
Totally agree. I think as marketers, we know that you shouldn't just be selling 24/7. And so you should have diverse content anyway before this happened. And so it's just about adding, those culture pieces into the mix with that already diverse mix of content.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's at a time, at least for something like, take Instagram for example, like can lean on like a story versus a post as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And so being able to like just simply share a story that, like, to the question from earlier about highlighting something that another org said while at the same time keeping your content in a post to get that awareness as well.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see if there are any more questions that anyone has. So we do actually have one last regular question. So what kind of content should brands be thinking about over the next couple of weeks?
I would say that right now is the time to provide the most value possible. Maybe let your selling content take a back seat and post content that's truly going to be valuable for your audience and maybe in a more relevant way to what's going on right now. Everyone's tired, everyone's exhausted, and so people are buying things, yes, but we also want to be considerate and sensitive of the fact that people are just looking for information right now. They're trying to learn. They're just trying to maybe even forget about something that's happening. So I think if brands provide the most value that they can right now, their audience will stick with them and they'll really appreciate that.
I agree. And I'd like to also add that I think now is a good time, and they should have been doing this towards the beginning of the month as well, but brands really need to take this time to be helpful.
Right.
And I think that this can be done still in a manner for B2C where they can still sell products. So like an idea that came to my mind, like Sephora could potentially just feature like a skincare tutorial, but they make sure that they're highlighting different minority groups to really kind of touch on the different challenges that perhaps they might have and kind of debunk some of those myths. Because I know for sure, like Black folks aren't wearing sunscreen as much as we're supposed to be, for example, and really talking about the importance of those types of things. I think maybe if like you're a mental health type service, you talk about the importance of making sure that you really take care of yourself and breaking down different stigmas that kind of go hand in hand with certain communities. Really trying to think about how can you particularly tie your messaging into the diversity inclusion conversations and really kind of making it work to where you're being a helpful authority. Because I think that's where people are very hungry for knowledge at this time. And I think that this is the moment where we continue to educate and be helpful for that. And then there was something I kind of wanted to add on to earlier. I'm seeing a lot of organizations actually not permitting their employees to show like Black Lives Matter pens, also pride pens, that type of thing. I think that brands really kind of are missing a moment where if they are trying to be on this bandwagon of diversity and inclusion, then what better way to do that than to simply empower your employees and let them truly feel comfortable in that particular space and actually let them vocalize their opinions. Obviously, no offensive shirts or anything that's cursing or doesn't like match company policies. If you need to vet the items that are being worn, or if you even want to provide your own items, that would even be better. But I think that it's very important not to mute people that work for your organization because they are what make your company work.
I totally agree, because if you are saying that you support the movement and all of these things, but then you're not allowing your employees to support it too, then do you really support it? You know? And so that's such a good question that brands that are limiting things like that need to ask themselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it looks like we actually lost your video feed, Stephanie.
Oh, dear.
I think we might be able to still hear you, but quarantine, and being at home live. But I think we're okay. We might still be able to hear you, I believe, though. So we got everything from your last comment. But I highly agree with both of you. I think that is extremely important. And so happy for you all just like during this time to, provide your thoughts and everything. So that sort of brings us to the end here. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much to Talissa and Stephanie for joining me here. This isn't easy, especially with such a heavy topic and trying to navigate all these different questions that everyone has. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you for being your authentic self. And thank you as well for the tips. I, in the laughs as well, I look forward to finding a way to eliminate my phone for at least an hour or two of my life. And I also just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us live and to everyone who is watching us on the recording. If there's a question that you have that we didn't get to, please feel free to drop it in the comments, and Joe Huber will make sure that someone gets you an answer. But that's it for me. I really appreciate, again, everyone watching, and Stephanie and Talissa again. But take care, everyone, and happy Wednesday. And at least at Sprout, this is our focus day. So I hope that everyone is able to find some time to focus as well. So bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.